Distant Rumor presents Chocolate Yoddah Live.
Hi, folks. Oh, man, I'm having all sorts of technical problems. Hi, folks. Chocolate Yoddah here, spelled Y-O-D-D-A-H, because film studios are litigious. And let's see, today is Tuesday, July 4th, 2023. Welcome to another installment of Chocolate Yoddah Live. It's an interesting day. Along with the fireworks, there's thunder and lightning. So far, I don't know if they're loud enough for the mic to hear, but, you know, it is what it is. And for those of you watching on YouTube, you might be thinking, who is that homeless dude doing a podcast? And why is he so fat? Well, yeah, that's what happens when I don't shave. And the fat part, well, that's just every day. And I am simulcasting on YouTube Live, the Wisdom app. Hello to the folks on Wisdom who have joined. And on Clubhouse, hopefully. Hopefully that's working. I don't know. I can't tell. I think it's picking up my mic. So today, being that it's America's birthday, I want to talk about Frederick Douglass. I have no stake in this place. It is merely where I was brought to. I had no part in the decision-making process that brought me here. I was 2 years old, and I am an immigrant. I was born in the Dominican Republic, for those of you who don't know, and I've been here for 57 years at this point. And it's an interesting place. I don't believe the hype about it, but it's not a terrible country. It's just not as good as people say it is most of the time. You know, America number one. Yeah, well, that's only if you're not comparing it to any other country. But being that it's the 4th of July, I want to read a little bit about Frederick Douglass and then read the famous speech that he gave in 1852 on 4th of July. And it's quite a speech, like no other speech that I've ever heard before, especially when he was invited to give this speech. I'm sure the people that invited him didn't see it coming, but I'm going to have to read it, so here we go. Frederick Douglass was born in 1817 and died in 1895. He was the best known and most influential black leader of the 1800s. He was born a slave in Maryland, but managed to escape to the North in 1838. This is the only time I plan to interrupt this, but just those words, he was born a slave. That's haunting to me. Just that idea that that's what some humans at that time in America went through. You were born a slave. That's crazy. That's crazy. He traveled to Massachusetts and settled in New Bedford, working as a laborer to support himself. In 1841, he attended a convention of the Massachusetts Anti-Slavery Society and quickly came to the attention of its members. Eventually, he became a leader in the New England anti-slavery movement. In 1845, Douglass published his autobiography, The Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, an American Slave. With the revelation that he was an escaped slave, Douglass became fearful of possible re-enslavement and fled to Great Britain and stayed there for 2 years, giving lectures in support of the anti-slavery movement in America. With the assistance of English Quakers, Douglass raised enough money to buy his own freedom, and in 1847 he returned to America as a free man. He settled in Rochester, New York, where he published the North Star, an abolitionist newspaper, easy for me to say. He directed the local Underground Railroad, which smuggled escaped slaves into Canada, and also worked to end racial segregation in Rochester's public schools. In 1852, the leading citizens of Rochester asked Douglass to give a speech as part of their 4th of July celebrations. Douglass accepted their invitation. In his speech, however, Douglass delivered a scathing attack on the hypocrisy of a nation celebrating freedom and independence with speeches, parades, and platitudes, while within its borders nearly 4 million humans were being kept as slaves. Here is his speech. Fellow citizens, pardon me, and allow me to ask, why am I called upon to speak here today? What have I, or those I represent, to do with your national independence? Are the great principles of political freedom and of natural justice embodied in that Declaration of Independence extended to us? And am I, therefore, called upon to bring our humble offering to the national altar and to confess the benefits and express devout gratitude for the blessings resulting from your independence to us? Would to God, both for your sakes and ours, that an affirmative answer could be truthfully returned to these questions. Then would my task be light, and my burden be easy and delightful. For who is there so cold that a nation's sympathy could not warm him? Who's so obdurate and dead to the claims of gratitude that would not thankfully acknowledge such priceless benefits? Who so stolid and selfish that would not give his voice to swell the hallelujahs of a nation's jubilee when the chains of servitude had been torn from his limbs? I am not that man. In a case like that, the dumb might eloquently speak, and the lame man leap as an hart. But such is not the state of the case. I say it with a sad sense of disparity between us. I am not included within the pale of this glorious anniversary. Your high independence only reveals the immeasurable distance between us. The blessings in which you this day rejoice are not enjoyed in common. The rich inheritance of justice, liberty, prosperity, and independence bequeathed by your fathers is shared by you, not by me. The sunlight that brought life and healing to you has brought stripes and death to me. This 4th of July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice, I must mourn. To drag a man in fetters into the grand illuminated temple of liberty and call upon him to join you in joyous anthems were inhuman mockery and sacrilegious irony. Do you mean, citizens, to mock me by asking me to speak today? If so, there is a parallel to your conduct, and let me warn you that it is dangerous to copy the examples of a nation, Babylon, whose crimes, towering up to heaven, were thrown down by the breath of the Almighty, burying that nation in irrecoverable ruin. Fellow citizens, above your national tumultuous joy, I hear the mournful wail of millions whose chains, heavy and grievous yesterday, are today rendered more intolerable by the jubilant shouts that reach them. If I do forget, if I do not remember those bleeding children of sorrow this day, may my right hand forget her cunning, and may my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. To forget them, to pass lightly over their wrongs, and to chime in with the popular theme would be treason and most scandalous and shocking, and would make a reproach before God and the world. I'm sorry, I read that wrong. And would make me a reproach before God and the world. My subject, then, fellow citizens, is American slavery. I shall see this today, I shall see this day and its popular characteristics from the slave's point of view. Standing here, identified with the American bondman making his wrongs mine, I do not hesitate to declare with all my soul that the character and conduct of this nation never looked blacker to me than on this 4th of July. Whether we turn to the declarations of the past or to the professions of the present, the conduct of this nation seems equally hideous and revolting. America is false to the past, false to the present, and solemnly binds herself to be false to the future. Standing with God and the crushed and bleeding slave on this occasion, I will, in the name of humanity, which is outraged, in the name of liberty, which is fettered, in the name of the Constitution and the Bible, which are disregarded and trampled upon, dare to call in question and to denounce, with all the emphasis I can command, everything that serves to perpetuate slavery, the great sin and shame of America. I will not equivocate. I will not excuse. I will use the severest language I can command, and yet not one word shall escape me that any man whose judgment is not blinded by prejudice, or who is not at heart a slaveholder, shall not confess to be right and just. But I fancy I hear some of my audience say, it is just in this circumstance that you and your brother abolitionists fail to make a favorable impression on the public mind. Would you argue more and denounce less? Would you persuade more and rebuke less? Your cause would be much more likely to succeed. But, I submit, where all is plain, there is nothing to be argued. What point in the anti-slavery creed would you have me argue? On what branch of the subject do the people of this country need light? Must I undertake to prove that the slave is a man? That point is already conceded. Nobody doubts it. The slaveholders themselves acknowledge it in the enactment of laws for their government. They acknowledge it when they punish disobedience on the part of the slave. There are 72 crimes in the state of Virginia which, if committed by a black man, no matter how ignorant he be, subject him to the punishment of death, while only 2 of these same crimes will subject a white man to like punishment. What is this but the acknowledgement that the slave is a moral, intellectual, and responsible being? The manhood of the slave is conceded. It is admitted in the fact that Southern statute books are covered with enactments forbidding, under severe fines and penalties, the teaching of the slave to read and write. When you can point to any such laws in reference to the beasts of the field, then I may consent to argue the manhood of the slave. When the dogs in your streets, when the fowls of the air, when the cattle on your hills, when the fish of the sea and the reptiles that crawl shall be unable to distinguish the slave from a brute, then I will argue with you that the slave is a man. For the present, it is enough to affirm the equal manhood of the Negro race. It is not astonishing that, while we are plowing, planting, and reaping, using all kinds of mechanical tools, erecting houses, constructing bridges, building ships, working on metal of brass, iron, copper, silver, and gold, that while we are reading, writing, and ciphering, acting as clerks, mechanics, and secretaries, having among us lawyers, doctors, ministers, poets, authors, editors, orators, and teachers, that we are engaged in all the enterprises, easy for me to say, that we are engaged in all the enterprises common to other men, digging gold in California, capturing the whale in the Pacific, feeding sheep and cattle on the hillside, living, moving, acting, thinking, planning, living in families as husbands, wives, and children, and above all, confessing and worshiping the Christian God, and looking hopefully for life and immortality beyond the grave, we are called upon to prove that we are men? Would you have me argue that man is entitled to liberty? That he is the rightful owner of his own body? You have already declared it. Must I argue the wrongfulness of slavery? Is that a question for Republicans? Is it to be settled by the rules of logic and argumentation, as a matter beset with great difficulty involving a doubtful application of the principles of justice hard to understand? How should I look How should I look today in the presence of Americans dividing and subdividing a discourse to show that men have a natural right to freedom, speaking of it relatively and positively, negatively and affirmatively? To do so would be to make myself ridiculous and to offer an insult to your understanding. There is not a man beneath the canopy of heaven who does not know that slavery is wrong for him. What? Am I to argue that it is wrong to make men brutes, to rob them of their liberty, to work them without wages, to keep them ignorant of their relations to their fellow men, to beat them with sticks, to flay their flesh with the lash, to load their limbs with irons, to hunt them with dogs, to sell them at auction, to sunder their families, to knock out their teeth, to burn their flesh, to starve them into disobedience and submission to their masters? Must I argue that a system thus marked with blood and stained with pollution is wrong? No, I will not. I have better employment for my time and strength than such arguments would imply. What, then, remains to be argued? Is it that slavery is not divine? That God did not establish it? That our doctors of divinity are mistaken? There is blasphemy in the thought. That which is inhuman cannot be divine. Who can reason on such a proposition? They that can may, I cannot. The time for such argument is past. At a time like this, scorching irony, not convincing argument is needed. Oh, had I the ability and could I reach the nation's ear, I would today pour out a fiery stream of biting ridicule, blasting reproach, withering sarcasm, and stern rebuke. For it is not light that is needed, but fire. It is not the gentle shower, but thunder. We need the storm, the whirlwind, and the earthquake. The feeling of the nation must be quickened. The conscience of the nation must be roused. The propriety of the nation must be startled. The hypocrisy of the nation must be exposed, and its crimes against God and man must be denounced. What to the American slave is your 4th of July? I answer, a day that reveals to him, more than all other days of the year, the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is the constant victim. To hear your celebration is a sham, your boasted liberty an unholy license, your national greatness swelling vanity. Your sounds of rejoicing are empty and heartless. Your shouts of liberty and equality hollow mock. Your prayers and hymns, your sermons and thanksgivings, with all your religious parade and solemnity, are to him mere bombast, fraud, deception, impiety, and hypocrisy, a thin veil to cover up crimes which would disgrace a nation of savages. There is not a nation of the earth guilty of practices more shocking and bloody than are the people of these United States at this very hour. Go search where you will. Roam through all the monarchies and despotisms of the old world. Travel through South America. Search out every abuse, and when you have found the last, lay your facts by the side of the everyday practices of this nation, and you will say with me that for revolting barbarity and shameless hypocrisy, America reigns without a rival. Oof. Frederick Douglass, July 4th, 1852. Well, please forgive my clumsy reading. I'm trying to get better at it. I've never been good at it. For those of you on Wisdom who hear Noble Ron read all the time, he is who I aspire to. I want to be able to read passages like he can. He's brilliant at it. I stink. Uh, but anyway, that's powerful stuff to me, man. I mean, I just, I read this every year. I have a recurring reminder that links me to this speech. It's just so powerful. I mean, the people that invited him must have had their jaws on the ground. They just did not see this coming. They're like, "Oh, we love you, Frederick. Come and speak on 4th of July." And he just kicked them in the taint over and over and over again. It's brilliant. It's so powerful, man. But it's a great reminder that you can try to whitewash history as much as you want. But the fact remains that slavery is America's original sin. And even though slavery is kind of illegal now, and I say kind of because in the first paragraph of the 13th Amendment, it says slavery is illegal unless you're a prisoner, which means when you arrest and imprison someone, you are allowed to treat them as a slave. How wild is that? But anyway, I don't think I really need to share any more thoughts on this. I think that speech truly speaks for itself. There's not a word that I would change about it. But if anyone on Wisdom wants to join in, the mic is open. Otherwise, I will close out. But wow, truly amazing stuff. Truly, truly, truly amazing. So that's what 4th of July means to me. I don't care about the pageantry and the pomp and circumstance. The meaning behind it has never been for me what it has been for most Americans. And that's okay. Everybody has their perspective. But, you know, I like to get to the truth of things. That's why my podcast is called The Persistent Rumor. I'm tired of the gaslighting. I'm tired of the propaganda. I just want to know the truth. And today, those words by Frederick Douglass are so powerfully true. And unfortunately, with very few exceptions, everything he wrote is still meaningful today. That's the thing that really gets me about it. Yeah, the exact conditions that he was describing are not present exactly, but slavery is still one of the biggest industries in the world and is happening in America. All right, there's a lot of people who are enslaved in America. You don't notice them. Sometimes they're your waitress. Sometimes they're cleaning your room in hotels. You know, sometimes they're, you know, picking fruit and packing food and, you know, driving trucks. You know, they're innocuous, but there are slaves in America. Those people, unbeknownst to you, are paying off their debt to someone for capturing them and bringing them here. They're trying to pay for their freedom. That's still going on this very moment in America. So that's it for now. Yeah, I have no more thoughts on the subject. Thank you for the folks on Wisdom who joined me. And thanks for anyone who watched. Peace, love, and granola. Talk to you soon.